Captain Taman Park stared at his screen and felt his heart beat faster. Something was wrong. The numbers dancing across his monitor made no sense at all. He had been watching the deep space frequencies for 5 years at Luna Station, and he had never seen anything like this before. "Hana, come look at this," he said quietly. His voice stayed calm, but his hands gripped the edge of his desk. Officer Hana Kim rolled her chair across the monitoring room. Her dark eyes scanned the data and her face went pale. "That's a distress signal," she whispered. "Taman, that's definitely a distress signal." The signal came from a place called the Epsilon Sector. Humans had never traveled there. It was too far away, too unknown, too dangerous. But now someone out there was screaming for help across the emptiness of space. Taman played the signal through the speakers. A strange warbling sound filled the room. It repeated every 47 seconds exactly. Hidden inside the noise were mathematical patterns, the kind that any intelligent species would recognize. Hana worked quickly, her fingers flying across her keyboard. Slowly, words appeared on the screen. "We are dying. They are coming. Please help." The message repeated over and over. Taman felt cold. Whoever sent this message was terrified. "Can you identify the species?" he asked. Hana nodded, pulling up more data. "They call themselves Valorians. They're a merchant civilization. Peaceful traders. No military to speak of." She paused and her voice dropped. "Taman, there's visual data attached to the signal." She put the images on the main screen. Both officers stepped back. The pictures showed huge ships, but they looked wrong. They seemed to be made of metal and flesh mixed together, pulsing with sickly light. These ships surrounded beautiful planets with cities and oceans. Then the planets died, burned, turned to ash. "What are those things?" Hana asked. "I don't know," Taman said. "But we need to report this immediately." Within 3 hours, the signal reached Earth's military headquarters. Admiral Doyen Choi stood in the command center, a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had fought in the Mars Rebellion and the Titan conflict. He had seen friends die. He had made hard choices. Now he stared at the same images that had frightened Taman and Hana. "It could be a trap," said General Park from the screen. "Remember the Proxima incident? False distress signals, then ambush." Admiral Choi nodded slowly. "I remember. I lost good people that day. Then you understand my concern." The general continued. "We don't know these Valorians. We don't know this enemy. Why should we risk our fleet?" Before the admiral could answer, Dr. Yuna Lee entered the room. She was the chief science officer, brilliant and direct. She carried a data pad and wore an expression of barely controlled anger. "Because it's real," she said firmly. "I've analyzed every aspect of that signal. The quantum encryption, the mathematics, the physics of the transmission. This isn't a fake. Those people are dying right now while we debate." She threw the data onto the main screen. Charts and graphs appeared, full of technical details. The visual data shows weapons we've never encountered. Energy signatures that don't match any known technology. Whatever is attacking them is completely new, and it's genocidal. The room fell silent. Admiral Choi looked at the images again. Burning planets, dead civilizations. He thought about his daughter back on Earth. He thought about what he would want if Earth was dying and begging for help. "Has anyone else responded to this distress call?" he asked. Yuna shook her head. "The Valorians sent it to the entire Galactic Council. 47 different alien civilizations received the message. Not one has responded." "Not one? Why?" the Admiral asked, though he already knew the answer. "Fear," Yuna said bitterly. "Or they simply don't care. The Council operates on a policy of non-interference. They won't risk their ships for a species they consider unimportant." Admiral Choi felt anger burn in his chest. He had met representatives from the Galactic Council before. Advanced species with incredible technology and centuries of wisdom. They spoke about peace and enlightenment and the greater good, but when someone needed help, they did nothing. "What do we know about this enemy?" he asked. Yuna pulled up more data. "The Valorians call them the Devourers. According to their records, these things appeared 6 months ago. They consume everything. Organic matter, minerals, even energy itself. They attacked 14 Valorian colonies. 12 are already gone. Military strength?" the Admiral asked. "Unknown. But the Valorians had some defensive ships. Outdated but functional. The Devourers destroyed them in minutes." Admiral Choi walked to the window and looked out at Earth hanging in the black sky, beautiful and blue and alive. He thought about the choice before him. Send the fleet into unknown space to fight an unknown enemy for people humanity had never met. It was dangerous, It was possibly suicide. Many would call it foolish. But he also thought about what it meant to be human. Humans were young compared to the other species. Humanity had no ancient wisdom, no superior technology. But humans had something else. When someone screamed for help, humans came running. He turned back to the room. Contact all fleet commanders. Initiate Protocol Omega. The room erupted. Officers looked at each other in shock. Protocol Omega had never been used before. It meant total fleet deployment. Every ship, every weapon, every soldier. Sir, General Park said carefully, Protocol Omega will leave Earth's defenses minimal. If this is a trap, then we'll die doing what's right, Admiral Choi interrupted. His voice was hard as steel. I will not let an entire species be wiped out while we hide behind our defenses. I will not become like the Council, debating philosophy while people burn. He looked around the room at every face. Prepare the Dreadnought Armada. We launch in 12 hours. Across Earth's orbital shipyards, massive vessels came to life. The dreadnoughts had been built in secret over 100 years. Each ship stretched 3 kilometers long, bristling with weapons that made other species uncomfortable. Humans built ships for war because humans knew the universe was dangerous. 52 dreadnoughts powered up their engines. Thousands of smaller ships joined them. Fighters, destroyers, support vessels. The largest military fleet humanity had ever assembled, prepared to jump into the unknown. On Luna Station, Captain Taman watched the preparations. Hana stood beside him. Do you think we'll win? She asked quietly. Taman didn't answer right away. He watched the great ships move into formation, their lights brilliant against the darkness of space. I think, he finally said, that someone asked for help and we answered. That's what matters. The fleet jumped to faster than light speed. Earth's armada vanished into the void, racing toward a war that might destroy them all. But they went anyway because that was what humans did. They heard a cry for help and they came. 3 days of travel through the empty darkness between stars. 3 days of preparation and worry. Then the human fleet arrived at the Valorian home system, and everyone understood that they were too late to save everyone. Commander Minho Kang stood on the bridge of his dreadnought, the Indomitable Will. He was a veteran of 20 years, steady and calm under pressure. But what he saw now made his stomach turn. 12 planets burned. Not burning, but already burned. Dead worlds that glowed with residual heat. Millions of lives simply erased. Sir, enemy contacts, called out Officer Jisoo Shin from the tactical station. Her voice was steady, but her knuckles were white on her controls. Multiple signatures, very large. The Devourer ships appeared on the screens. Minho had seen many alien vessels in his career. The elegant curves of Ashiri cruisers. The geometric perfection of Kryn warships. But these things looked like nightmares. They seemed to shift and writhe. Hulls made of dark metal that pulsed like living tissue. Some had appendages that reached out like hungry arms. Others were covered in what looked like eyes or mouths. Analysis, Minho ordered, keeping his voice level. Jisoo worked quickly, scanning the enemy ships. What her instruments told her made no sense. Commander, those ships are consuming debris. They're eating the remains of destroyed Valorian vessels. And sir, they're growing. The more they consume, the larger they become. Minho felt cold fear touch his spine. An enemy that got stronger by destroying you. That was new. That was terrible. On the flagship Eternal Phoenix, Admiral Doyen Choi received the same data. Before he could issue orders, a communication request came through on an emergency frequency. A weak signal, barely holding together. This is Elder Counselor Thane of the Valorian people, a voice said. It sounded old and tired and full of pain. Is someone there? Please, is anyone there? This is Admiral Choi of Earth's United Fleet, the Admiral responded. We received your distress signal. We came to help. Silence. Then a sound like crying. You came? But the Council said no one would come. They said we were too far, too small, not worth the risk. You came? We came, Admiral Choi said simply. Where are your survivors? The Valorian appeared on screen. He looked humanoid, but with bluish skin and large, kind eyes that now held only sorrow. Most of our people are gone, but we have refugee ships. 3 million souls fleeing toward the outer system. The Devourers are hunting them. Not anymore, the Admiral said. Send me their coordinates. But the Devourers had already detected the human fleet. The biomechanical ships turned as one, moving with terrible purpose. They attacked. The battle began without warning. Devourer ships launched projectiles that seemed to bend space itself. Human shields absorbed the first impacts, but barely. Then the Devourers fired some kind of energy beam that cut through a human destroyer like it was paper. The ship broke apart, and 300 lives ended in silent explosions. Return fire, Minho ordered. All weapons. The human fleet showed what it could do. Rail cannons fired metal slugs at incredible speeds. Plasma torpedoes created miniature suns. Antimatter missiles released devastating explosions. The weapons hit the Devourer ships hard. Armor cracked. Hull sections exploded. Dark fluid that might have been blood spilled into space. But then something terrible happened. The Devourers adapted. Within minutes they changed their shields to deflect the rail cannons. They grew thicker armor against the plasma. They learned. They're evolving, Jisoo said in disbelief. They're adapting to our weapons in real time. Another human ship took critical damage. Then another. The Devourers pressed their advantage, surrounding isolated vessels. Minho watched in horror as the destroyer Steel Talon was swarmed by 6 enemy ships. They ripped it apart piece by piece. But Lieutenant Hyun Nam, the weapons officer aboard the Steel Talon, did something desperate. With his ship dying around him, he fired every nuclear missile in the ship's arsenal at point-blank range. The nuclear explosions were massive, primitive, and devastating. The Devourer ships recoiled. They pulled back from the radioactive fire. For the first time, they showed something that might have been fear or confusion. Did you see that? Hyun transmitted before his ship lost power. They don't like nukes. They hesitate. They're not adapted to nuclear weapons. The message reached Admiral Choi just as the Steel Talon went dark. Hyun and his crew were gone, but they had given humanity valuable information. The Devourers had probably never faced an enemy crazy enough to use nuclear weapons in space combat. Most species considered it barbaric, dangerous, and unnecessary. Humans were perfectly willing to be barbaric if it meant survival. All ships, tactical retreat, Admiral Choi ordered. Fall back to Point Gamma. Sir, one of his officers questioned. Retreating looked like cowardice. Trust me, the Admiral said quietly. The human fleet withdrew in good order, firing constantly to cover their retreat. The Devourers followed, eager and hungry. They had tasted human ships now. They wanted more. But Minho understood what the Admiral was doing. He had served under Choi for years. The old man never ran from a fight. He was leading the enemy into a trap. The human fleet reached a dense asteroid field. Perfect cover. Perfect chaos. The Devourers poured in after them, confident in their growing strength and adaptation. Now, Admiral Choi said, hidden among the asteroids were hundreds of mines. Not elegant energy mines. Nuclear mines. Dirty, brutal weapons that any civilized species would avoid. The mines detonated all at once. The entire asteroid field became a hell of nuclear fire. Devourer ships caught in the blast were torn apart. Their biomechanical bodies couldn't adapt fast enough to survive multiple nuclear explosions. Dozens of enemy vessels died. The survivors pulled back in disorder. The human fleet emerged from the other side of the asteroid field. Battered but intact. They had lost ships and people, but they had proven something important. The Devourers could be hurt. They could be killed. Admiral Choi opened a channel to all ships. Good work. But this is just the beginning. Those things will adapt to nuclear weapons too, given time. We need to end this fast. He pulled up a star map. The Devourer fleet was huge, still numbering in the hundreds. But the human fleet had something the enemy didn't. Strategy, planning, and the sheer human stubbornness to never give up. Dr. Lee, he said to Yuna, who worked frantically at her science station. Tell me you've learned something about these things. Yuna looked up, and despite the danger, she smiled grimly. Actually, yes. I've been analyzing their formation patterns and communication signals. Admiral, they're a hive mind. They operate with perfect coordination because they're all connected to central command ships. I'm calling them Nexus ships. Can we identify these Nexus ships? The Admiral asked. Yes. They're the largest vessels, positioned at the center of their formation. If we destroy the Nexus ships, the rest will lose coordination. They'll become confused, easier to fight. Admiral Choi studied the tactical display. The Nexus ships were protected by layers of defenders. Getting to them would require punching through the entire Devourer fleet. Ships would be lost. People would die. But if they did nothing, the Valorians would die. And after the Valorians, the Devourers would move to another species, and another, until eventually they might reach Earth. Send a message to Commander Kang, the Admiral said. Tell him to prepare his battle group. We're going to kill their command structure. Minho received the message and looked at his crew. Young faces. Brave faces. They knew what was being asked of them. A suicide run into the heart of the enemy fleet. Well, Minho said with a slight smile, I suppose this is what we trained for. All hands prepare for assault operations. Today, we show these things what humans can do. The crew responded with grim determination. They were afraid, but they were ready. The human fleet regrouped at the edge of the Gauntlet Nebula, a massive cloud of gas and dust that provided cover from sensors. Ships docked together for repairs. Medical teams worked to save the wounded. Engineers patched holes in hulls. And Admiral Doyon Choi planned his next move. Far away, in the gleaming towers of the Galactic Council headquarters, representatives of 47 different alien civilizations held their emergency session. They had been debating for 3 days now. Should they acknowledge the Valorian situation? Should they send observers? Should they issue a statement of concern? They talked and talked while planets burned. This was how the Council always worked. Slow, careful, avoiding any action that might create risk. The elder species believed in patience and wisdom. They had survived for thousands of years by never taking chances. But humans were different. Humans didn't have thousands of years of civilization. They had barely left their own solar system 2 centuries ago. What humans had instead was the ability to act quickly, adapt, and fight with everything they had. Deep in the engineering section of the Dreadnought Eternal Phoenix, Soman Han worked without sleep. She was the chief engineer, a woman of 40 with sharp eyes and scarred hands from years of working with dangerous machinery. Right now she was developing what she called Hellfire Protocols. Show me the missile modifications, she said to her assistant. The young engineer pulled up the designs. We've increased the yield by 40%, but the radiation signature is massive. Any civilized species would consider this a war crime. Soman laughed bitterly. Good thing we're fighting monsters, not people. Approved, move to production. She moved to the next station where teams worked on kinetic weapons. These were simple in theory. Take a very dense object, accelerate it to incredible speed. Let physics do the rest. The impact would release energy equal to nuclear weapons, but without radiation. How many can we manufacture? Soman asked. With our current resources, maybe 200, the weapons specialist replied. Make 400, Soman said. Strip every ship down if you have to. I want overwhelming firepower. The engineers exchanged glances but nodded. They understood. This wasn't a time for half measures. While Soman worked on weapons, pilot Junho Bei prepared for the most dangerous job in the fleet. He was 31 years old, handsome, and known for his reckless courage. He commanded Wraith Squadron, 20 elite fighters designed for stealth reconnaissance. Listen up, he told his pilots in the briefing room. We're going deep into Devourer territory. Our job is to map their positions, identify their Nexus ships, and mark targets for the main fleet. We get in quiet, we get out quiet. Anyone who wants to back out, no shame. This is suicide mission material. Not one pilot moved. They all stayed in their seats, faces set with determination. Junho smiled. That's what I thought. Let's go be ghosts. The Wraith fighters launched silently, their engines modified to produce minimal energy signatures. They slipped through the debris fields and dead planets, moving toward the heart of Devourer-controlled space. What they saw made them sick. The Devourers weren't just destroying civilizations. They were consuming them. Entire cities were being dissolved and absorbed. Forests, oceans, even the atmosphere itself was being harvested. The enemy left behind only empty rocks. This is Wraith Leader, Junho transmitted on encrypted channels. I've got eyes on the target. confirming multiple Nexus ships marking coordinates now. His instruments painted the enemy vessels with invisible laser designators. The data flowed back to Admiral Choi. 3 Nexus ships, each surrounded by hundreds of defenders. Getting to them would be nearly impossible. Back on the flagship, Dr. Yuna Lee worked with the intelligence they had gathered. She barely slept, living on coffee and determination. Her research revealed disturbing truths about their enemy. The Devourers are completely alien to anything we know, she explained to the Admiral. They don't communicate in ways we understand. They don't negotiate. They exist only to consume and grow. Every planet they harvest makes them stronger. Can they be stopped? Admiral Choi asked. Yes, but only with overwhelming force. If we destroy the Nexus ships, the hive mind breaks down. The individual Devourer vessels become confused, operating on instinct rather than intelligence. That's our window to finish them. The Admiral studied the tactical maps. His fleet was outnumbered. His ships were damaged, but he had something the Devourers didn't expect. Human creativity and the willingness to use any tactic necessary. He called a meeting of all his commanders. They appeared on screens throughout the fleet. Faces tired but determined. We're going to execute Operation Prometheus, the Admiral announced. The fleet will split into 3 battle groups. Captain Hyejin Kwan, you'll take Battle Group Alpha and protect the Valorian refugee convoy. They're the reason we came here. Not one civilian ship gets touched, Hyejin nodded. She was the captain of the Dreadnought Guardian's Oath, known for her defensive expertise. Understood, sir. They'll be safe. I'll lead Battle Group Beta in engaging the main Devourer fleet, the Admiral continued. We'll hit them hard and keep them busy. And Commander Kang, you'll take Battle Group Gamma straight through their lines to destroy the Nexus ships. Minho appeared on screen from the bridge of Indomitable Will. He understood what was being asked. His battle group would face the heaviest resistance. Most of his ships probably wouldn't return. How many ships do I get? Minho asked calmly. 12 dreadnoughts and 30 escort vessels, the Admiral replied. The best we have. It's enough, Minho said. It wasn't, but he said it anyway. Admiral Choi looked at all the faces on his screens. Young and old, veterans and newcomers, all of them knowing they might die. I won't lie to you. This operation is dangerous. We're going to take heavy casualties. But if we don't stop the Devourers here, they'll keep spreading. They'll consume everything. Maybe eventually they'll reach Earth. He paused, gathering his thoughts. The Galactic Council won't help. They're too afraid or too arrogant or too comfortable. But we're not the Council. We're human. When we see people suffering, we act. When we see evil, we fight it. That's not naivety. That's not stupidity. That's who we are. The commanders began to respond, pledging their support, but the Admiral held up his hand. One more thing. This is voluntary. Any ship that wants to withdraw has my permission. No judgment. Some fights aren't yours to fight. Silence filled the communication channels. Then Captain Hyejin spoke. Permission to speak freely, sir? Granted. With respect, Admiral, that's the dumbest thing you've ever said. Every ship here volunteered the moment we left Earth. We're not leaving now. Voices erupted in agreement, captains shouting their support. Crews cheering in the background. The entire fleet as one committed to the mission. Admiral Choi felt emotion tighten his throat, but he kept his voice steady. Then let's show them what humanity can do. Operation Prometheus begins in 6 hours. Get your people ready, the channel's closed. The ship's prepared. Captain Taman Park, still monitoring communications from his assigned station on a support ship, recorded a message to send back to Earth. It would take weeks to arrive, but he wanted people to know. If you're hearing this, we're probably gone, he said into the recorder. But I want you to know we didn't hesitate. We came to help strangers because that's what humans do. If we don't make it back, tell everyone we did it proudly. Tell them we showed the galaxy what it means to have courage. Similar messages were being recorded across the fleet. Love letters to families, final words to friends, goodbye messages from people who knew they might never go home. But there were also messages of different kinds. Engineers describing the new weapons they'd developed. Pilots explaining the tactics they'd invented. Scientists sharing data about the enemy. Even in the face of death, humans were thinking, creating, improving. Soman finished her weapon modifications. Yunho briefed his squadron. Dr. Yuna completed her analysis. Every person in the fleet did their job with quiet professionalism. As the 6 hours counted down, Admiral Choi stood alone on his bridge, looking out at the stars. His ships were ready. His people were brave, but would it be enough? He thought about his daughter back on Earth. She was only 7 years old. She believed her father was a hero. He hoped she would still think so, even if he never came home. "All ships report ready, sir," his first officer said. Admiral Choi took a deep breath. "Then let's begin. All battle groups move to your positions. Operation Prometheus is now active. The fleet split apart. 3 groups of ships heading toward their destinies. Some would survive. Many would not. But they all went willingly, carrying humanity's message into the darkness. We don't abandon people to monsters. Not ever." The battle began on 3 fronts at once, and space itself seemed to catch fire. Captain Hyejin Kwan stood on the bridge of Guardian's Oath, watching the Devourer swarm approach the Valorian refugee convoy. 3 million civilians in fragile ships running for their lives. Behind them came death in the form of 50 biomechanical horrors hungry for consumption. "All ships, defensive formation Delta," Hyejin ordered calmly. "Put yourselves between those refugees and the enemy. Not one Devourer gets through." Her battle group consisted of 8 dreadnoughts and 20 escort vessels, against 50 enemy ships. The math was terrible, but Hyejin didn't care about math. She cared about the families in those refugee ships. The Devourers attacked with savage intensity. Their weapons tore into human shields, burning through defensive fields. The destroyer Braveheart took a direct hit and exploded. 200 lives gone in an instant, but the remaining ships closed ranks, absorbing damage meant for the civilians behind them. Officer Hana Kim, transferred to Guardian's Oath for her communication skills, worked frantically to coordinate with the Valorian ships. "Tell them to scatter," she shouted over the noise of impacts. "Use evasive pattern, Sierra. Keep moving, never stop." The refugee ships spread out, making themselves harder targets. It was working, but barely. A Devourer vessel slipped past the human line, diving toward a cluster of civilian transports. Hyejin didn't hesitate. "Ramming speed," she ordered. Her crew stared at her. "Captain?" "You heard me. Put us between that thing and those transports. Now." Guardian's Oath. 3 kilometers of metal and weapons accelerated directly into the Devourer's path. The enemy ship tried to dodge, but too late. The Dreadnought's armored prow crashed into the alien vessel at full acceleration. The Devourer ship crumpled, its biomechanical body torn apart by the impact. Guardian's Oath survived but was badly damaged. Hull breaches on 12 decks. Engines operating at 40%. But the refugee ships behind them were safe. "Damage report," Hyejin said, pulling herself up from where the impact had thrown her. "We're still flying," her first officer reported. "Barely. Then we keep fighting." Across the battlefield, Admiral Doyun Choi led Battle Group Beta against the main Devourer fleet. This was a brutal, grinding fight with no clever tactics, just raw firepower and determination. Lieutenant Hyun Nam, promoted after his sacrifice on Steel Talon, and now serving on the Admiral's flagship, controlled the weapon systems. He unleashed everything humanity had developed over centuries of warfare. Nuclear missiles that turned space into fire, plasma weapons that burned hot as stars, and the relativistic kill vehicles that Soman had built. These projectiles accelerated to 90% of light speed. When they hit, the kinetic energy was devastating. A single impact punched through a Devourer ship from bow to stern, the metal projectile releasing energy equivalent to dozens of nuclear weapons. "Direct hit on Target 17, Hyun reported with grim satisfaction. Target destroyed, but the Devourers were learning. They adapted their shields. They maneuvered to avoid the relativistic weapons. They concentrated fire on damaged human ships, destroying them before they could retreat. The human fleet was inflicting casualties, but taking them too. The destroyer Morning Light was torn apart by focused fire. The cruiser Steadfast suffered a reactor breach and detonated. Each loss meant hundreds of friends and comrades gone. "Sir, we've lost 8 ships, the tactical officer reported. The enemy is adapting faster than we expected." Admiral Choi's face was hard as stone. "Then we adapt faster. All ships switch to pattern Omega. Randomize weapon types. Don't let them predict what we'll use next." The human fleet changed tactics constantly. Nuclear weapons one moment, kinetic the next, then plasma, then rail cannons. The Devourers couldn't adapt to everything at once. It gave humanity the edge they needed, but the real battle was happening at the third front. Commander Minho Kang led his 12 dreadnoughts straight into the heart of enemy territory. This was Operation Prometheus, the desperate charge to destroy the Nexus ships. Pilot Junho Bay's Wraith Squadron flew ahead, marking targets and clearing paths through the Devourer defenses. His fighter dodged and weaved through enemy fire, missiles tracking him, energy beams missing by meters. Wraith leader to strike force, he transmitted. I've marked the approach vector. It's going to be tight, but it's our best shot. Minho saw the path on his tactical display. It went through a dense concentration of enemy ships. At least 300 defenders between his battle group and the Nexus ships. Normally, he would call such an approach suicide. Today, it was just the mission. All ships follow Indomitable Will, he ordered. Full power to forward shields. If we stop, we die. So we don't stop. The 12 dreadnoughts charged forward like ancient cavalry. Their weapons fired continuously, clearing space ahead. Escort vessels spread out to protect the flanks. It was magnificent and terrible at the same time. The Devourers swarmed them. Enemy ships attacked from every angle. The escort vessel Defender took critical damage and fell behind, its crew firing weapons until the ship exploded. The Dreadnought Titan's hammer lost its engines and drifted, still shooting as enemy ships overwhelmed it. But the survivors pushed forward. Minho's Indomitable Will led the way, its armor scarred and burning but still advancing. Officer Jisoo Shin coordinated the weapons fire with precision. Each shot counted, nothing wasted. We're through the outer defenses, she reported. Nexus ships in range. Minho saw them now. 3 massive vessels, each twice the size of a human dreadnought. They pulsed with sickly light, and he could feel their presence somehow. The intelligence behind the Devourer swarm. The minds directing the slaughter. Target the nearest Nexus ship, he ordered. Fire everything. The surviving dreadnoughts concentrated their fire on a single target. Nuclear fire engulfed it. Kinetic projectiles hammered its hull. Plasma burned away its armor. The Nexus ship shuddered under the assault, its biomechanical body writhing in agony. But it wasn't enough. The thing was too large, too strong. It would take more than conventional weapons to kill it. Minho looked at his crew. Good people, brave people. They had followed him into hell without question. Now he was going to ask them for one more sacrifice evacuation order, he said quietly. All non-essential personnel to escape pods. You have 3 minutes. His crew understood immediately. Jisoo stared at him. Commander, no. There has to be another way. There isn't, Minho said gently. Someone has to make sure this thing dies. That someone is me, now go. That's an order. The crew hesitated, but discipline held. They began evacuating. Jisoo lingered, tears in her eyes. It's been an honor, sir. The honor was mine, Minho said. Now get out of here. As the escape pods launched, Minho took manual control of Indomitable Will. The ship was his now. Just him and 3 kilometers of weapons and armor. He activated the Singularity warhead in the ship's core, a prototype weapon that humanity had been too afraid to use. It would create a miniature black hole briefly before collapsing. Anything caught in its range would be destroyed, including Minho's ship. This is Commander Kang to all forces, he transmitted. Deploying final solution. Clear the area. He aimed his damaged dreadnought directly at the Nexus ship and fired all engines. The ship accelerated faster and faster, a missile of metal and determination. The Devourers tried to stop him, but it was too late. Indomitable Will crashed into the Nexus ship at full acceleration. At the moment of impact, Minho activated the Singularity warhead. Space twisted, reality bent. A black hole formed at the collision point, pulling in everything nearby. The Nexus ship collapsed inward, crushed by impossible gravity. Hundreds of Devourer ships around it were dragged into the Singularity. Then, as quickly as it formed, the black hole evaporated in a burst of radiation. When space stabilized, the Nexus ship was gone. And so was Minho. Across the battlefield, the Devourer fleet shuddered. Part of their hive mind had died. Their coordination suffered. Ships moved erratically, no longer working together perfectly. Officer Jisoo Shin, watching from her escape pod, saw the opportunity. She transmitted to the remaining battle group ships. All vessels target the second Nexus ship while they're disorganized. For Commander Kang, the 4 surviving dreadnoughts, damaged but functional, turned their weapons on the second Nexus ship. But before they could fire, another dreadnought made its final choice. Steel Talon, crippled and drifting, its life support failing, aimed itself at the target, its captain refusing to die helplessly. activated her own ship's self-destruct, and rammed the second Nexus ship at maximum velocity. The explosion was tremendous. The Nexus ship broke apart, its massive body splitting down the middle. 2 Nexus ships down, 1 remained, but humanity had paid the price. Of the 12 dreadnoughts that started the charge, only 3 survived. Of the 30 escort vessels, barely 10 remained. Thousands of lives lost, yet the Devourer fleet was breaking. Without their command ships, the biomechanical horrors fought on instinct rather than intelligence. They were still dangerous but no longer invincible. Admiral Choi saw the change immediately. All forces press the attack. Their command structure is failing. Drive them back. The human fleet surged forward. Even damaged ships fired their last weapons. Even wounded crews refused to stop fighting. This was 2 weeks after the battle. Admiral Doyun Choi stood in the medical bay of his flagship and looked at the numbers. The Eternal Phoenix had survived, but barely. 3 decks were open to space. Half the crew was injured, but they were alive, and that was something. The final count was devastating. Of the 52 dreadnoughts that left Earth, only 16 would return home. Thousands of smaller ships destroyed. Over 12,000 human lives lost. The largest military defeat in human history, except it wasn't a defeat. The Valorians survived. All 3 million refugees were safe. The Devourer fleet had been scattered, driven back into the darkness. And for the first time ever, an entire species owed its existence to humanity's courage. Dr. Yuna Lee entered the medical bay, carrying a data pad. She looked exhausted but alive. Admiral, the Valorians are requesting permission to come aboard. Elder Counselor Thane wants to meet you personally. Let them come, the Admiral said. An hour later, the Valorian delegation arrived. Counselor Thane was old, his blue skin marked with the scars of survival. He walked slowly, accompanied by several other Valorians who looked at the humans with something close to worship. When Thane reached Admiral Choi, he did something unexpected. He knelt. The other Valorians followed his example. Please, that's not necessary, Admiral Choi said, uncomfortable with the gesture. It is absolutely necessary, Thane said, his voice thick with emotion. You came when no one else would. You bled for people you didn't know. You gave your lives for strangers. He looked up, tears streaming down his face. How do we thank you for that? How do we repay such a gift? Admiral Choi helped the old Valorian to his feet. You survive. You rebuild, you live. That's all the thanks we need, but why? Thane asked, genuinely confused. Why would you risk everything for us? We have nothing to offer you. No technology, no resources, no military alliance. Why did you come? Dr. Yuna answered before the Admiral could. Because you asked for help. Because you were dying. For humans, that's enough reason. The Valorian counselor shook his head in wonder. The galaxy sees humanity as young and aggressive. They fear your weapons and your willingness to fight. But I see something else. I see a species that understands what it means to care for others. Far away in the gleaming halls of the Galactic Council, an emergency session was reaching its conclusion. Representatives of 47 alien civilizations had been debating for 2 weeks about what to do regarding the Valorian situation. They had finally reached a decision. They would send observers to assess the damage. They would consider offering humanitarian aid. They would form a committee to study the Devourer threat. In 6 months, they might take action. Then the human transmission arrived. Captain Taman Park had been chosen to deliver humanity's message to the Council. He appeared on their screens wearing his uniform, standing in the debris-filled command center of a damaged ship. This is Captain Taman Park of Earth's United Fleet. Speaking on behalf of Admiral Choi, he began. His voice was calm but hard. 2 weeks ago, the Valorian people sent a distress signal to this council. 47 civilizations received that call for help. Not one of you responded. Not one. The council representatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. You have the power to save lives, but you lacked the will to act, Taman continued. You spoke of non-interference and careful consideration while people died. You chose safety over righteousness. You chose comfort over courage. An Ashiri representative tried to interrupt. You don't understand the complexities of, I understand perfectly, Taman cut him off. You're ancient civilizations with incredible technology and centuries of wisdom. But when someone needed help, you did nothing. Humanity is young. We're barely 2 centuries into space travel. We don't have your advanced weapons or your superior knowledge, but we have something you've forgotten. We have the will to act when others suffer." He paused, letting his words sink in. Earth lost 12,000 people saving the Valorians. 12,000 sons and daughters, mothers and fathers, friends and lovers. We paid that price because it was right, because someone asked for help and we answered. The council chambers were silent. From this day forward, Earth withdraws its application to join the Galactic Council, Taman announced. We don't want to be part of an organization that debates philosophy while civilizations burn. Instead, we're forming something new. We call it the Sentinel Alliance, a coalition of species who believe in defending the defenseless. Any civilization that shares that belief is welcome to join us, he ended the transmission. The council representative sat in shocked silence. Then slowly messages began arriving from other species. Younger civilizations mostly. Species tired of council inaction. They wanted to know more about this Sentinel Alliance. They wanted to help. Within days, 20 different species had pledged to join. Within weeks, 40. The galaxy was changing, and humanity had sparked that change. Back in the Valorian system, engineer Soman Han worked alongside Valorian technicians. She wasn't sharing weapons technology. Humans had learned their lesson about that. Instead, she taught them how to build better defenses. Early warning systems, shield generators, evacuation protocols. The Devourers will come back eventually, she explained to her students. You need to be ready, but you won't face them alone anymore. That's the point of the Sentinel Alliance. Pilot Junho Bei established a training program on the largest remaining Valorian space station. Pilots from multiple species came to learn human combat tactics. They were shocked by how aggressive humans fought, how willing they were to sacrifice ships to protect others, how they used weapons other species considered barbaric. You fight like you're insane, one alien pilot complained after a simulation. Junho grinned. Maybe we are, but we win, don't we? And more importantly, we protect what needs protecting. Officer Jisoo Shin, now promoted to commander after Minho's sacrifice, led the effort to recover escape pods and survivors from the battlefield. They found hundreds of people still alive in damaged ships and drifting pods. Each rescue felt like a victory against the darkness. She also recovered personal effects from the destroyed vessels. Letters, photos, small treasures that meant everything to grieving families. It was painful work, but necessary. Every person lost deserved to be remembered. 3 months after the battle, a memorial was completed on Luna Station where the whole journey began. A wall of black stone listed every name of the fallen. 12,000 names. Captain Taman stood before it with Hana beside him, reading the names they knew. Friends, colleagues, heroes. At the bottom of the wall, someone had carved an inscription. They heard a cry for help from across the stars. They went, they fought. They paid the price. This is humanity's promise. We will not let you die alone in the dark. News of the inscription spread across the galaxy. Other species read those words and understood. Humanity wasn't just another military power. They were something different. Something the galaxy desperately needed. Dr. Yuna Lee continued her research on the Devourers. The threat wasn't gone, just scattered. The creatures were out there somewhere, regrouping, adapting, but her work led to the development of early detection systems. Now when the Devourers attacked, civilizations would have warning. Time to evacuate. Time to call for help, and help would come. Because the Sentinel Alliance was growing. Training, preparing, not for conquest, but for protection. Admiral Doyen Choi finally returned to Earth 6 months after the distress signal first arrived. His fleet was battered, his ships were scarred, but when they entered Earth's orbit, they were greeted as heroes. Not because they had won a great victory, but because they had done what was right. He reunited with his daughter, who ran into his arms crying. You came back, she sobbed. I was so scared. I promised I would, he said softly, and I keep my promises. Later, at the official ceremony, human leaders offered him medals and honors. He accepted them on behalf of his fleet, but insisted that the real heroes were the ones who didn't come back. Commander Minho Kang, the crew of Steel Talon, the thousands who gave everything. We didn't go to the Valorian system for glory, he told the assembled crowd. We went because it was right. Because when someone calls for help, humans answer. That's not a weakness. That's our greatest strength. The ceremony ended with a moment of silence for the fallen. Across Earth, Across the fleet, across human colonies everywhere, people stopped and remembered. 12,000 lives given so that millions of others could survive. In the following years, the Sentinel Alliance became a force in the galaxy. Not the largest or most powerful, but the most trusted. When disasters struck, when enemies threatened, when civilizations faced extinction, they knew who to call, and humans always answered. The Galactic Council slowly changed as well. Embarrassed by humanity's actions and their own inaction, they began to reform. They became more responsive, more willing to act. It was slow, but it was progress. Elder Counselor Thane lived another 20 years. He spent them traveling the galaxy, telling the story of humanity's courage. He spoke to thousands of young people, teaching them that civilization wasn't about technology or longevity. It was about character, about choosing to help even when it was dangerous. On his deathbed, he was asked if he had any final words. He smiled and said simply,